Good morning, my name is Christelle from France de Klerk, Independent Technical Analyst. This morning we start with Sanlam, and we can see that the share has really experienced some sell-off, profit-taking, long upper shadows implying that the selling pressure was fierce, and it's now approaching oversold levels, and very important, it's also consolidating below the 40-week moving average. And below the 40-week moving average, that means the long-term sentiment towards the share is now negative. Many investors have asked, where's the buying opportunity? At the moment, we don't have any turnaround candle yet. There's no indication of optimism yet on a weekly graph. There's no indication that there's long lower shadows on the candles to imply that the buyers have accumulated in weakness. At the moment, it's just the one red candle after the other with long upper shadows. So we can use different horizontal lines or trend lines, diagonal trend lines, to identify support or resistance. What we maybe can see is exactly similar to year in April of last year, changed it into a resistance and then start supporting it as soon as it's oversold. Look at that. It is a share that as soon as it becomes oversold, investors like to accumulate it again for the long term. All right. So for now, my first support is waiting at 78 Rand 79. Or I can use that long lower shadow in the week of the 5th of August. And that is waiting at 74 Rand 99. We don't know where the share will stop making lows. But wherever that is, we'll start to wait for a turnaround candle, and then based on the optimism which will imply that the informed capital has also started to nibble on the share, that's when we will start to accumulate. What we can see as well is we've got a possible left shoulder, and it's way too early to say that already, but we've got a possible left shoulder, maybe a head, and then maybe a right shoulder, but that's too early to say that. So let's see, wait for Sunlam. If you are really keen to nibble, your first sign of optimism will be when this week's high, waiting at 82 Rand 30, starts to change into a support again, along with a positive divergence. And with that, it means that the blue line, the K percentage line, has to break upwards through the orange line, the D percentage line. Mr. Price. Very similar story. Long consolidation base, sell-off, and then obviously at some stage, some profit taking. Very important, if we look at that low in the week of the 4th of November of last year, we can see, and that waits at 246 Rand 67, right? At 246 Rand 67, it can act as a support, but the share needs to start to consolidate above that, right? My 40-week moving average is a support at the moment and needs to remain one in order to sustain the momentum to the top. Again, what we can see here is a little bit of a bounce and then a sell-off again, which means I'll have a left shoulder, a head, and a right shoulder. Again, it's too early to say that. My stochastic, both lines are still pointing downwards, implying that the momentum to the bottom is clearly in place. There's no sign of a positive divergence yet. It's all at the moment downwards from here. Technically, the first sign of strength will only be above this week's high, and that is waiting at 252 Rand 49. Only above that level, my first sign of strength will be visible, or last week's high, and that is waiting at 277 Rand. PPC. Very similar situation as well. What we can see here is a little bit of consolidation and then profit taking. Very important, look how far all these three shares have moved from the 40-week moving average, and then obviously some consolidation to the side and then profit taking. Right, at the moment the share is in mid zone, it's trading at 55 in the stochastic, and that means it's not an ideal place to either buy or sell a share. We always want to consider buying a share when it's oversold, with a positive divergence. That blue line needs to break upwards through the orange line, or when the share is overbought. When that blue line breaks downwards through the orange line and a negative divergence gets confirmed. Now, what is positive at the moment of the PPC graph is the fact that this week's candle has got is green. It's a harami type of candle, but very important, it's got a long lower shadow. And with a long lower shadow, it implies that there were buyers that accumulated in weakness. That means despite the fact that the share went very low, there were people that said, listen, I am going to buy the dips. If I look back in the week of the 2nd of December, we can see at very similar levels. The low of that week was 4.44 Rand, and if the share can continue to consolidate above 4.44, we can maybe see a little bit of a bounce again to higher levels. We can clearly see that resistance at 5.20 on PPC is a critical resistance. And if we go back to that time year in January and December of 2022, we can see again the share with a double top formation gave an incredibly strong warning, and it was a sell-off ever since then. What is negative at the moment about this graph is the fact that this resistance here in the beginning of 2025 or at the end of 2024 is lower than that resistance year in the beginning of January of 2022. And that is negative. That implies lower highs on a long-term basis, and when the share starts to consolidate the 40-week moving average into a resistance, that will also change the long-term sentiment towards the share to negative. I will only, as I said, only above 520 will PPC be positive again, and can we assume that the momentum to the top will continue? Sea harvest is an interesting one, and some might even say it is very similar to a possible Darvas model. A Darvas model is based on a book written by a dancer called Nicolas Darvas, and he based it on his practicing sessions in the studio, where he practiced for a long time and did the same move over and over and over again, and then eventually one day he got it right, and it was a perfect flip to the upside. But very important with a Darvas model, there needs to be a spike in volume, and I don't have that yet on I do have it yet. I do have a spike in volume. In the week of the 26th of August of 2024, that is seen as positive, ladies and gentlemen. So if the share price starts to consolidate for higher levels going forward from this going forward after this spike in volume, we can assume that the spike in volume was due to higher more buyers, and not sellers. Very strong resistance on sea harvest is waiting at 8.79 Rand, and only below 7.95 Rand will the optimism be wiped off the table. Very important, depending on the graph, the program that you use for your graphs, the fact that this bar, the volume bar, is red doesn't mean that there were more sellers than buyers. It only means that in that session the price closed lower. So you can only confirm that a spike in volume was due to selling pressure or buying pressure based on the fact what the share price does going forward. And at the moment, after this spike in volume, the share price did a little bit of a bounce and consolidated sideways on very thin volume, right? So only when the share price starts to bounce and reach for higher levels can we assume that the spike in volume was due to buying pressure, and can we see upside. Let's just add the 20-week moving average here as well, something that we always like to I just want to make it a little bit thicker. Two moving averages that we always like to use to maybe confirm a golden cross or a death cross formation. Now, a golden cross formation, many of you know that it's when a 20-week moving average crosses upwards through a 40-week moving average. And that is positive, and it can either be a 20 or a 10, or it can be a 5 and a 10, depending on how the moving averages react to the graph. So sometimes you have to play with the moving averages to see which ones work. When the shorter moving average breaks downwards through the longer moving average, in this case the red one, we call it a death cross formation, and that is seen as very negative. That normally implies a bearish trend and confirmation that we can see more downside. So first sign of strength would be above the 40-week moving average, and that is the red line, above R8.15, and the green line will be my second level of resistance that needs to change into a support, and that is waiting at R8.23. Very important, we might be sitting here as well with a possible cup and handle formation, and that will only be confirmed above R8.79, and above that level we can see the share maybe at R9.60 going forward. The optimism around this cup and handle will be confirmed once the support of R8 changes into a resistance. Below R8, the optimism will be wiped off the table completely. My stochastic is in mid-zone, pointing downwards, very negative, not an ideal place to buy anything, but the golden cross is positive. That tells me that the bullish trend is confirmed. My cup and handle is a possibility, that's positive. And so it just needs to get above R8 and remain above it. And then C harvest might be an opportunity going forward. But R8 is a critical level that needs to remain a support. First change into a support and then remain a support. Don't forget to send through your requests if you've got any to either admin@fransdeklerk.com or send us a message on Twitter. Have a great week. Take care.